My son was dead. My daughter-in-law wanted my life's work, and she wanted me silenced, locked away. She thought she had won. She thought the diagnostics empire I built was hers. She forgot about the will. She forgot that my son knew exactly who she was. And he left one line, just one line, to fight back from the grave. My name is Evelyn Hart. At 65. I thought I understood loss. I thought I understood the mechanics of the heart, both the biological pump and the metaphorical center of our lives. I was wrong. The morning sun in Bay Ridge, California, felt warm on my face as I sipped my coffee, the marine layer just beginning to burn off. It was a peaceful, ordinary Tuesday, until the phone rang. The caller ID showed Madison, my daughter-in-law. Her voice wasn't tearful. It was flat, efficient, like a receptionist cancelling an appointment. Noah's gone. I gripped the granite countertop, the kitchen, which seconds before had been bright, suddenly felt airless and cold. Gone where? Madison. What are you talking about? He's gone. Evelyn. Heart complications. It's done. Calling the medical examiner is pointless. I've already handled it. What do you mean you've handled it? I'm coming to the hospital. Don't bother. I've signed all the necessary papers. A click. She hung up. I stared at the phone. Heart complications. Noah was 42. He ran marathons. I've signed the necessary papers. The words echoed, metallic and wrong. My hands were shaking so badly I dropped my keys twice. I grabbed my purse, stumbling toward the door. On the console table, a silver frame stopped me cold. It was Noah, beaming, his arm around me. He was 30 years old, captured at the grand opening of Heartline Diagnostics, my company. The medical technology firm I built from nothing, from sketches on napkins in a garage when I was poorer than dirt. I built it to save lives. I built it for him. The drive to St. Jude's was a blur of brake lights and the rising nausea of dread. I kept redialing Madison's number. Each call snapped immediately to voicemail. Her voice, automated and breezy, felt like a slap. Leave a message. I am busy handling my husband's affairs. My husband's affairs. Not our loss. Not your son. I abandoned my car in the emergency bay and ran inside. The reception nurse looked at me with that practiced, pitying stare reserved for the bereaved. I'm looking for Noah Hart. I'm his mother. She typed. Her face tightened. Ma'am? Mr. Hart isn't in a room. He was moved downstairs. Downstairs to the morgue. No one called me. No one waited for me. His wife was here. Ma'am. She handled the arrangements. I demanded his chart. My voice carries weight in medical circles. Heartline Diagnostics supplies half the advanced imaging equipment in this building. A young resident, looking terrified, finally met me by the nurse's station. Mrs. Hart, I'm so sorry. We thought you knew. Knew what the chart says, cardiac arrest due to treatment complications. What treatment? The doctor swallowed, avoiding my eyes. Mrs. Blake Hart signed the paperwork last night for reduced intervention. My blood ran cold. What paperwork? A DNR, he whispered. A do not resuscitate order, and she approved a comfort care protocol. Noah. A DNR, he was 42. We had discussed end-of-life care explicitly after his father passed. This wasn't him. This was never him. Then I saw her. Madison. She emerged from a private waiting room, not a hair out of place. She was wearing an elegant, sleeveless black dress. Her eyes were completely dry. She looked, I realized with a jolt, like she was closing a successful business deal. "Evelyn," she said, her voice flat. "You should go home. This is over. Over, my son is downstairs. Madison, what did you sign? Why didn't you call me?" She took a step closer, close enough that only I could hear the venom, the absolute lack of grief in her voice. "This is a wife's job now. It is not the place for an expired old woman." Expired. The word hung in the antiseptic air, sharper than any scalpel. "I want the full report," I demanded, my voice shaking with a rage that was finally eclipsing the shock. "I want to see every paper you signed. I want the autopsy." Madison actually smiled, a tiny, sharp lift at the corner of her mouth. "You'll hear everything you need to know at the family meeting, and at the will reading." She adjusted the strap of her designer handbag. "Until then, Evelyn, I suggest you learn to sit still and be quiet." She turned, and her heels clicked away down the hall, leaving me alone under the humming fluorescent lights. I don't remember the drive home. The house was cavernous, silent. I collapsed into my study, the world tilted on its axis. My phone, forgotten, lit up on the desk, a low battery warning. I plugged it in, and the screen illuminated with a message I hadn't yet answered. It was from Noah, sent 2 days ago. "Mum, I need to talk about Madison and Heartline. Something isn't right." The funeral was held at the small chapel on Riverside Hill, the one overlooking the bay. Madison turned it into a theatrical production. A large screen hung above the casket, playing a slideshow of curated moments, Madison and Noah clinking champagne glasses on a yacht, Madison and Noah laughing in Aspen, Madison holding Noah's hand by a fireplace. It was the perfect couple, produced and directed by his widow. I was nowhere to be seen. I was directed, not asked, to sit in the second row. The front pew was reserved for Madison's friends from the city, women in sharp black hats and sunglasses, and 3 men I didn't recognize. A program identified them as the Interim Steering Committee for Heartline, my company. Madison stood at the lectern, a vision in custom-tailored black, dabbing at perfectly dry eyes with a silk handkerchief. Her speech was a masterpiece of passive assassination. She spoke of Noah's burdens and his struggles. "Noah always felt the weight of expectation," she said, her voice catching just enough to sound sincere. "He often told me he felt controlled by the past, how he longed to be free to steer Heartline into a new era. His era." Several heads turned, eyes, filled with pity or curiosity, landed on me. In seconds, she had painted me as the anchor holding my son back, the very reason he was perhaps stressed into an early grave. I sat frozen, my hands gripping the wooden pew, my grief suffocated by a rising, cold fury. I scanned the crowd, desperate for a familiar, sympathetic face. My eyes landed on a man in the back row, standing near the exit. He was not a mourner. He was an observer. Sharp suit, expensive watch, an aura of ruthless corporate energy. He was Victor Hale, the CEO of NeoVantage Health, our most aggressive competitor. As Madison finished her eulogy to a smattering of polite applause, I watched her walk down the aisle. She paused, and Hale leaned in, whispering something in her ear. She nodded, a tiny, satisfied smile touching her lips before she composed her face back into sorrow. After the service, as people milled around offering hollow condolences, I saw my granddaughter, Lily. She was 17, looking lost and pale, clutching her phone. I moved toward her, needing to hold her, to see Noah in her eyes. Lily, sweetheart. Come, Lily. Madison materialized between us, her hand clamping down on Lily's shoulder. She didn't look at me. She looked past me. We have a meeting with the Heartline board. Grandma Evelyn needs her rest. She steered Lily away, a sheep following its shepherd, leaving me standing alone by the lilies. I retreated to the vestibule, pretending to look at the guest book. Madison was in a corner with her city friends, accepting hugs. I heard a peal of laughter, quickly shushed. Then I heard Madison's voice, clear and sharp. Just a few more weeks, she whispered to her clique. The lawyers are handling the transition. The entire legacy will be mine. A subtle tilt of her head in my direction, is just a monument that needs to be moved. A monument, not a founder, not a mother, just a stone obstacle. The coldness in her face, the raw calculation, snapped me back to Noah's last few phone calls, his voice tight with stress, echoing in my memory. Mom, I think someone's using Heartline like an ATM, he'd said just a week ago. I'm seeing payments for services I never authorized. It feels like someone is gutting us from the inside. At the time, I'd assumed it was a standard corporate security issue. Now, watching Madison smile at Victor Hale, it felt like something else entirely. That evening, the house felt emptier than ever. The scent of funeral flowers clung to my suit. I was scrolling through emails, deleting messages of condolence I couldn't bear to read, when one caught my eye. It was from Price & Rowe, my family's law firm for 30 years. Dear Mrs. Hart, it read. Per the directive of the late Mr. Noah Hart, a private reading of his final will and testament will be held tomorrow at 10 a.m. at his primary residence. Your attendance is mandatory. Noah's directive, not Madison's. I sat back in my study, the room Noah and I had built together. The original blueprints for the Heartline Mark I diagnostic scanner were framed on the wall. My life's work, his inheritance. I looked at the email again, then at the photo of Noah on my desk. For the first time, a truly terrifying thought took root in my mind. Madison wasn't just greedy. She might be dangerous. The coastal mansion Noah and Madison had shared was all glass and white marble, a cold, minimalist box overlooking the Pacific. It never felt like my son. Today, the living room, with its ocean view, had been rearranged. Rows of stiff-backed chairs faced a single mahogany table at the front. It wasn't a home. It was a corporate execution chamber. Jonah Price stood behind the table, his face impassive. Jonah had been our family's lawyer for 30 years. He'd drafted the papers for Heartline's incorporation. He nodded at me, a flicker of something unreadable in his eyes. As I took a seat in the front row, the room was filled with the interim steering committee I'd seen at the funeral, a few distant cousins, and several of Heartline's key department heads, who all looked profoundly uncomfortable. The door swung open, and Madison entered. She wasn't in mourning black. She wore a vibrant, expensive-looking cream dress that hugged her figure. On her arm, possessively, was Victor Hale. She was radiant, glowing with victory. She projected her voice across the room, as if addressing a press conference. After today, everything will be simple. We can finally move forward. She guided Hale to a seat beside her, directly opposite me. Then she stood, addressing the small crowd as if she already owned it. I just want to thank you all for coming. While Evelyn, she gestured to me, a dismissive flick of her hand, was the beginning, we all know that the future belongs to the young, and that future is me. A few people shifted. Even Victor Hale looked momentarily surprised by her audacity. Jonah Price cleared his throat, the sound cutting through the tension. He held up a thick manila envelope, the wax seal broken. We are here to read the last will and testament of Noah Hart. I must inform you all that this document was revised and executed 3 weeks prior to Mr. Hart's passing. I was present. Mrs. Blake Hart, he said, nodding at Madison. Was not. Madison's smile faltered for just a second. Jonah began to read. The first part was standard. The house, their personal bank accounts, art, and cars were left to my wife, Madison Blake Hart. A substantial trust was established for Lily. Several million went to Noah's favourite charities. Madison's smile returned, broader this time. She leaned back, crossing her legs, the picture of a woman who had just inherited the world. Then Jonah paused. He put on his reading glasses and looked down at the next page. We now come to Mr. Hart's controlling shares in Heartline Diagnostics, his lifetime work, and the legacy of his mother. The room went utterly silent. Madison leaned forward, her eyes glittering. All of Noah Hart's shares, comprising his full stake in Heartline Diagnostics, Jonah read slowly, are to be placed into the irrevocable Hart Family Trust. The sole guardian and administrator of this trust is to be my mother, Evelyn Hart. Madison shot to her feet. What, that's impossible. He would never. Please, Mrs. Blake Hart, Jonah said, holding up a hand. I am not finished. He looked back at the paper, his voice growing louder, projecting to every corner of the room. Mr. Hart included a specific, non-negotiable codicil, which he requested be printed in bold. He read the words, and each one landed like a hammer blow. Any heir, direct or indirect, who attempts to limit the voice, legal capacity, or governing rights of my mother, Evelyn Hart, in any matter pertaining to Heartline, shall immediately forfeit all rights and claims to any assets contained within this will, including all shares designated for the Hart Family Trust. A collective gasp sucked the air from the room. Madison just stood there, her face white. Jonah Price took off his glasses. He looked directly at Madison, his gaze cold as steel. Mrs. Blake Hart, 2 days after your husband's death, you filed a petition with the Superior Court seeking legal and medical guardianship over Evelyn Hart, claiming she was senile and unfit to manage her own affairs, let alone her interest in the company. He let the words hang in the air. By that action, Jonah continued, you have knowingly triggered this clause. You have, of your own volition, disinherited yourself completely from any and all shares of Heartline Diagnostics. They now rest solely with the trust, under Mrs. Hart's exclusive control. No. It was a shriek. That's fraud. He was sick. She manipulated him. This is abuse. Jonah didn't flinch. I assure you, Mr. Hart was of perfectly sound mind when he signed this. His signature was notarized, and his personal physician provided a letter of capacity, which is attached. He stacked the papers neatly. Ms. Blake, he said, pointedly dropping the Hart. As you no longer have any legal stake in the disposition of Heartline Diagnostics, you have no standing in this meeting. I must ask you to leave so we may continue with the relevant parties." She was, for the first time, speechless, expelled, humiliated in front of the very people she had tried to impress, in front of the rival CEO she had brought to witness her coronation, her face contorted into a mask of pure hatred. "You," she screamed at me, "you did this." She kicked off one of her expensive heels and threw it. It missed me, shattering a glass picture frame on the wall, a photo of Noah as a boy. "I will destroy you," she spat, her voice cracking. "I will burn Heartline to the ground before I let you have it." She grabbed Victor Hale by the arm and stormed out of the room, slamming the door so hard the walls shook. The room was left in stunned silence. I looked at Jonah, my heart pounding a strange rhythm of terror and triumph. He had saved me. My son. Noah had saved me. He had reached back from the grave. But as the shock subsided, a cold dread settled in. I had just been handed back my life's work, only to be declared its mortal enemy. This wasn't an ending. It was the declaration of a new, much uglier war. The victory was a ringing bell in a silent room, but the echo faded fast. It didn't last 2 days. Before 48 hours had passed, a man in a cheap suit found me. He served me papers while I was standing in my own driveway. Madison was suing me. The accusations were vile, a twisted reflection of the truth, undue influence, coercive control, exploitation of a compromised patient. She was formally accusing me, in a court of law, of forcing my dying son to change his will against his wishes. That lawsuit was only the opening salvo. The full-scale attack began immediately after. The local news, which had once celebrated Heartline as a community pillar, suddenly found a new narrative. Medical matriarch accused of manipulating son's will. One headline screamed, "Grieving widow fights for husband's true legacy." Read another. The articles were filled with quotes from anonymous sources who detailed my controlling nature and my obsessive grip on the company. Then, Madison played her trump card. She appeared on a morning talk show, draped in black, her face a mask of careful sorrow. She cried. Actual tears this time, telling the host how I had never accepted her, how I had always treated her as an interloper. Noah was brainwashed. She wept. He was so tired of trying to please her. She leaned forward, delivering the killing blow. Honestly, I'm just worried about her. At her age, with this kind of grief, I'm not sure she's lucid enough to manage a company of that size. It's dangerous. The narrative was set. I wasn't just grieving. I was senile. I wasn't just a founder. I was a relic. I wasn't just a mother. I was a monster. It worked. The Heartline Temporary Board, the one Madison had assembled, panicked. My phone rang. It was Calvin Reed, our independent chairman. I had known Calvin for 20 years. "Evelyn," he said, his voice slick with discomfort. "The optics on this are terrible. The stock is taking a hit. The investors are worried. The board feels, we feel, it might be best for the company's reputation if you voluntarily stepped back from all operations until this is resolved." I was being asked to surrender, to walk away from the company I built to appease the woman who was trying to steal it. I hung up on Calvin and drove straight to Jonah Price's office. He was waiting for me. The offending newspapers spread across his mahogany desk. "She's painting a picture," Jonah said grimly. "The senile old woman versus the young, grieving widow. It's a powerful story." "It's a lie," I said, my voice shaking. I know. He reached into his desk and pulled out a file. From it, he retrieved a single sheet of paper, a high-quality scan of a handwritten note. I recognized Noah's impatient scrawl immediately. It was dated 2 months ago. Jonah, it read, I need to update the will. I need a clause, something strong, to protect my mother. I'm worried Madison will try to cut Mom out of Heartline completely. My hand flew to my mouth. He had seen it. He had seen exactly what she was. He didn't get to explain everything. Evelyn, Jonah said softly. He called me 2 days after sending this, told me he was gathering information, that things were messy with Madison and some of Heartline's finances. He signed the new will, and then he was gone. I read the last line of Noah's note, a line I would never forget. If I don't get to explain, just know that Mom is being hunted. We are not stepping back, Jonah said, his voice hardening from lawyer to warrior. We are not going on the defensive. That clause he wrote isn't just a shield, it's a sword. You're not just protecting your assets. Evelyn, you are protecting the truth of what Noah feared and why he died. He was right. This wasn't a business dispute. This was an investigation. I know someone, Jonah said. She used to be an internal inspector at the main hospital system. She finds things people try to bury. Her name was Rosa Delgado. We met the next day at a 24-hour diner that smelled of stale coffee. Rosa was sharp, impatient, and wore a leather jacket that had seen better days. She didn't offer condolences. She ordered black coffee and listened. I laid it all out. The call from Madison, the DNR, the heart complications, the will, the lawsuit, Noah's last text message. She listened without a word, her spoon stirring her coffee. Tink, tink, tink. When I finished, she stopped stirring and looked me dead in the eye. A guy changes his will to protect his mother from his wife. He tells his mother something isn't right. He tells his lawyer he's being hunted. Then he suddenly dies from a complication, while his wife is the only one who signed off on a DNR. She took a long, slow sip. I don't believe in coincidences. Mrs. Hart. Rosa did not wait. While Madison was busy painting me as a senile predator in the press, Rosa was in the trenches, pulling on the threads of Noah's last days. She began with the hospital, using her old credentials and the legal weight of Jonah's formal requests. She requisitioned Noah's complete medical file, the pharmacy logs, and the ICU hallway security footage for his final 72 hours. The hospital complied, but the victory was hollow. The medical chart was sparse, and the video files covering the hours of 10 p.m. to 2 a.m. on the night Noah died, the exact window Madison was listed as his only visitor, were unusable. A routine server glitch, the head of IT claimed. The file was corrupted. Glitch, Rosa said to me over the phone, her voice dripping with cynicism, is just a polite word for intentionally erased. But digging in a hospital always rattles something loose. A week later, Rosa got a call. A nurse, one who had abruptly quit her job 3 days after Noah's death, wanted to meet. She was terrified. Rosa met her at the same diner. The nurse told Rosa she couldn't sleep. She said that on the final night, Madison had arrived well after midnight, insistent and cold. She was carrying a small, unlabeled vial of dark liquid, which she claimed was a private herbal remedy for his anxiety. When the nurse hesitated, Madison became ice. She demanded the nurse add it to his IV. The nurse refused. So Madison changed tactics. She claimed she'd spoken to their family physician, who had authorized a reduction in Noah's prescribed heart medication, claiming it was making him agitated. She pressured the nurse, threatening to report her for denying patient comfort. The nurse, intimidated, overworked, and facing the wife of a major hospital benefactor, eventually complied. She lowered the dosage on the automated pump. While Rosa mined the hospital, Jonah and I excavated my son's digital life. Jonah gained access to Noah's encrypted cloud drive and his work laptop. What we found turned my grief into a cold, hard rage. It wasn't just a few discrepancies. It was a systematic plunder. There were dozens of Excel files, cryptically named NV Side Transfers, NV Consulting. They documented massive, regular payments from Heartline to a series of shell companies I had never heard of. These weren't vendors. They were ghosts, tucked in a simple text file. Noah had left himself a memo. It wasn't meant for me, which made it all the more chilling. It read, Madison plus Calvin plus Neovantage inflating shares. If Mum finds out, they will do anything to silence her. I read it 3 times. Calvin Reed, our board chairman. The man who told me to step back. The man I had known for 20 years. They weren't just trying to take Heartline. They were facilitating a hostile takeover by our biggest rival. Neovantage. Rosa and Jonah brought the pieces together in my study. The timeline was damning. Over the last 18 months, Heartline, under Calvin's guidance as chairman and with Noah's apparent signature, had signed a series of strategic consulting contracts. Millions of dollars. The money was wired to those shell companies, then immediately rerouted to an offshore trust. A trust, Jonah's paralegal discovered, where Madison's personal lawyer held signatory power. Noah must have found out. His browser history confirmed it. His recent searches included how to void contracts for conflict of interest and reporting SEC violations, insider trading, medical M&A. He had been gathering the evidence to stop them. Rosa wasn't done with the hospital. The deleted footage is a dead end, she said. But the network logs aren't. She tracked down an IT technician, a junior guy who hated the hospital's management. He'd seen the request to wipe the server and, smelling a rat, had quietly backed up the system logs for that night. The logs showed exactly what Rosa suspected. At 1:30 a.m., the night Noah died, Madison's personal patient portal account was accessed. The login point wasn't from home. The IP address was internal, originating from the terminal right inside Noah's ICU room. She had logged in, accessed his chart, and navigated to the physician's settings. She had altered the parameters for the cardiac monitor's remote alarm, widening the acceptable range so it would take a much more severe event to trigger an alert at the nurse's station. Rosa came to my house late that night. She placed a single black USB drive on my desk. "Here it is," she said, her voice heavy. "This is everything Noah was trying to pull together. The financial records, the nurse's affidavit, the IT logs. It's not enough to prove murder. Not yet. They'll say she was just a frantic wife playing doctor. But it's enough to destroy Madison's lawsuit, ruin Calvin, and crater Neovantage's stock." She looked at me, the diner coffee cup in her hand. "That is, if we can deploy it before they realize what we have, we're not just fighting a lawsuit, Mrs. Hart. We're fighting the people who silenced your son." Madison's lawsuit for undue influence was just the opening shot, designed to test my defenses. The real assault came a week later. She filed a new motion, this one far more public and infinitely more cruel. She was petitioning the court to declare me legally incapacitated, unfit to manage Heartline, unfit to even manage my own checkbook. The petition was a clinical, brutal document. It cited my age, 65. It referenced my medical records, noting my high blood pressure. It used my grief, my profound depression following Tangja stay, as a weapon, claiming I was emotionally volatile and mentally unstable. She demanded the court appoint a neutral third-party guardian to oversee my affairs and, most importantly, the Heartline Trust. The person she suggested for this neutral role, citing his long history with the company and his stable leadership, Calvin Reed. The attack was two-pronged. On the exact same day, her petition hit the court docket. Victor Hale's Neovantage Health submitted a formal proposal to the Heartline board. They called it a strategic alliance, an offer to buy 49% of the company to resolve the current instability and provide steady leadership. It was a vulture's bid, timed perfectly to exploit the chaos Madison was creating. Calvin called an emergency board meeting. I walked into the room, and the men I had hired, men whose children's college tuitions I had helped pay, could not meet my eyes. Calvin brought the Neovantage offer to the table. "This isn't a vote to accept," he said smoothly. "Merely a vote to open negotiations, given the delicate situation with the trust. It's prudent to explore all options." He cast the deciding vote in favor. He then looked at me, his face a mask of false regret. "Evelyn, the board feels your personal conflicts are a liability. We believe Heartline must be protected. You are no longer the right persona for our future growth." I was stunned. It was a corporate assassination, clean and precise. Rosa, however, had already found the motive. She had dug into Calvin's server and found the email. It was from Calvin to Madison, sent the day after the will reading. The subject line, the narrative. It read, "As long as we keep her tied up in the guardianship fight, we push the old hag narrative. The board will panic. Neovantage will have its opening." Old hag. The man I'd had to my home for Thanksgiving. "They're arrogant," Jonah said when I showed him the email. His voice was a low growl. "They think they're running the same old play, but they don't know what Noah did." He tapped the will, which sat on his desk like a loaded weapon. "This is our leverage. Madison's entire case rests on the idea that she is worried about you, that she is acting out of concern. We are going to show the judge that Noah knew she would do this. He predicted this exact attack. You don't predict that your loving, concerned daughter-in-law will try to have you declared senile. You predict it from an enemy." The day of the first guardianship hearing, the courtroom was a media circus. Madison arrived, and I watched the photographers swarm her. She wasn't the slick corporate raider from the will reading. She was wearing a soft blue maternity dress, and she was visibly, undeniably pregnant. She placed a protective, trembling hand on her rounded stomach as the cameras flashed. It was a brilliant, sickening move. She was no longer just the widow. She was the vulnerable young mother, carrying the only grandchild I would ever have. Her lawyer was smooth, his voice dripping with sorrowful concern. "Your Honor," he pleaded, "my client is trying to protect her future child's legacy. Mrs. Hart's obsession with power is so profound that she is willing to destabilize the very company her own grandchild depends on. She is a threat to the financial stability of this family." During the first recess, as the judge retired to his chambers, The courtroom emptied. Calvin Reed approached me by the heavy oak doors. He smelled of expensive cologne and deceit. "Evelyn," he said, his voice low, as if sharing a secret. "Listen to me. This is a bad look for you. It's sad." I just stared at him. "Sign the papers," he whispered. "Agree to the guardianship. Let me take over the trust. I will guarantee you a pension that will make you very, very comfortable. You can travel. But if you keep fighting this—" He leaned in, his smile gone. "You will lose everything. The court will see you as you are a bitter, confused old woman, and they will take it all anyway. This is your last, best offer." I looked up, meeting his eyes for the first time. My voice was quiet, but it didn't shake. Noah didn't change his will so I could sell myself out for a pension. Calvin. He changed it so I could fight. His face hardened. He knew I meant it. I walked home that night, ignoring my driver. The city lights blurred past. My hands were steady, but my heart was pounding against my ribs, a trapped bird. It wasn't the high blood pressure Madison had cited in her petition. It was the ice-cold, terrible realization that the knife in my back wasn't just held by my son's wife. It was being twisted by the man I had trusted to protect his legacy. I was completely, utterly surrounded. Calvin's threat in the courthouse hallway was a mistake. It was the mistake of an arrogant man who believes he is insulated from consequences. He had forgotten who I was, but worse, he had forgotten who Rosa Delgado was. Rosa, now convinced Calvin was the linchpin, stopped digging at Heartline and started digging into him. She moved with frightening efficiency. Men who are desperate for money always leave a scent. She discovered Calvin wasn't just wealthy, he was massively in debt. A disastrous private real estate venture in Asia had collapsed, leaving him on the hook for millions in personal guarantees. He wasn't just supporting Madison's play, he was relying on it. He needed the Neovantage buyout to save his own skin. The proof arrived less than a day later, delivered to Jonah's office by an anonymous messenger. It was a single printout of a leaked email, sent from Victor Hale's private server to Calvin's. The offer was blunt, lacking any corporate euphemism, a guaranteed executive board seat at Neovantage post-merger, and a strategic consulting fee of 7 figures, payable upon the successful removal of the Heartline Trust's current administrator. Me? I looked at the email, the black and white text spelling out the mechanics of my corporate execution. Betrayal. It was so total, so complete. I was in my old study at the Heartline building, a room I'd kept for sentiment, surrounded by the ghosts of my company. I stared at the wall of built-in bookshelves, and suddenly, a memory surfaced. Noah. He must have been 15, a brilliant, paranoid kid obsessed with spy movies. He'd been adamant that my office wasn't secure. "Mum, they'll rip you off," he'd insisted, and then presented his solution, a backup system, a hidden drive wired to the conference line to record any high-stakes call or meeting in my office. "Just in case," he'd said. I had forgotten about it for 20 years. My breath caught. I ran to the shelf, pulling at the heavy medical texts. Behind a row of binders, I found the small, almost invisible panel he'd installed. My fingers, clumsy with adrenaline, fumbled for a catch. It clicked open. There, covered in a thick, grey shroud of dust, was a small metal box. Inside was an old-style digital recorder and a black external hard drive, connected by a tangle of wires, a faded label, in my son's angular teenage handwriting, read, Board 2019. Jonah didn't trust anyone at Heartline to touch it. He sent it, via secured courier, to a forensic data recovery specialist. The wait was excruciating. We sat in his office for hours, the silence broken only by the clock. Finally, the specialist called. They had recovered one massive, encrypted audio file. The label wasn't a typo. It was from 6 years ago. Jonah plugged in the file and hit play. I remembered the day instantly. It was the dark time, when a failed clinical trial had pushed Heartline to the brink of bankruptcy. The recording was from an emergency meeting. My voice, Calvin's, and a third voice, a venture capitalist trying to force a fire sale. I heard the investor lay out the insulting terms. Then I heard Calvin. His voice was smooth, reasonable, the voice of a trusted advisor. Evelyn, take the deal. It's a lifeline. They're offering you an honorary seat. Let Heartline be absorbed. It's just a business, after all. There's no shame in cashing out. And then my own voice. It sounded younger, sharper, a voice I hadn't heard in years. It was edged with steel. No, I didn't build this to be a poker chip in a hedge funds game. Calvin, Heartline saves people. It is not for sale. There was a long, cold silence on the recording. Then Calvin spoke again, and the mask of friendship was gone. His voice was flat, dead, a reptile's voice. Your time will end. Evelyn, everyone's time ends. When it does, you won't be in control anymore. A chill so profound it was almost violent shot through me. It wasn't a warning. It was a prophecy he intended to fulfill. Jonah paused the audio. His face was pale. My God, he whispered. This isn't just a recording. It's a motive. It's a pattern. It proves his hostility isn't new. It's 6 years old. He picked up the phone. I'm adding this to the evidence list for the guardianship hearing immediately. We will prove that Madison's petition isn't about your health. It's the final move in Calvin's long game to declare you irrelevant. He left the room to talk to his litigation team. I stayed, staring at the muted speakers. I rewound the file and played my own words again. It is not for sale. I listened to the woman in that recording, the one who had faced financial ruin and had not blinked. Hot, unfamiliar tears welled in my eyes and spilled down my cheeks. I wasn't crying from weakness. I was crying because I recognized her. That woman was still in here. She had just been waiting, and I needed to let her out. The courtroom was a standing-room-only circus. Every bench was filled. Reporters lined the back wall. I saw a dozen Heartline employees I'd known for years, their faces anxious. I saw investors, and in the very last row, unmistakable in their sharp suits, sat a small delegation from Neovantage Health, there to watch their victory unfold. Madison sat at the plaintiff's table, the picture of maternal concern, her hand resting on her pregnant stomach. Her lawyer began. He was good. He painted a picture of a grieving, addled old woman, lost in the past. This is not about malice, Your Honor, he said. It is about care. He presented his evidence. A short, grainy video clip taken from the funeral, showing me breaking down, my face buried in a handkerchief, my medical file, obtained by subpoena, showing a prescription for high blood pressure medication. A condition, the lawyer intoned, known to cause cognitive confusion at her advanced age. His final piece was a cleverly edited snippet from an interview I'd given 5 years ago, where I'd laughed and said, "Sometimes I do feel a little outdated with all this new tech." The clip ended there. cutting off the rest of my sentence, where I'd explained how my foundational principles were timeless. The judge, a woman in her 50s with intelligent, wary eyes, watched it all without expression. Then it was Jonah's turn. He didn't rise with a flourish. He rose like a man building a fortress, brick by brick. "Your Honor," he began, his voice calm and clear. "What you have just seen is a narrative, a story, carefully crafted to paint a false picture. We are here to provide the facts." He started with Noah's handwritten letter to him, requesting the change of will. He presented the notarized document itself, showing Noah had driven to the law office alone, of his own free will. And then he brought up the codicil. "The one line," he said, "that Mr. Hart insisted on." He turned, not just to the judge, but to the entire room, and read it slowly. "Any heir, direct or indirect, who attempts to limit the voice, legal capacity, or governing rights of my mother, Evelyn Hart." He let the words hang. Then he looked directly at Madison. "Your Honor, the petition for guardianship we are here to discuss today, this very document that claims my client is incapacitated, was filed by Mrs. Blake Hart a mere 2 days after her husband's death, before the funeral, before the will was even read. It is the very definition of the act my client's son sought to prevent." A murmur swept the room. Madison's lawyer jumped up. "Objection, speculation." "It is not speculation," Jonah countered smoothly. "It is motive." He then moved to introduce the audio file from 6 years ago. "We will show," he said, "that the man Madison has suggested as a neutral guardian, Mr. Calvin Reed, has a long-documented financial incentive to see my client removed from power." He played the recording. The courtroom was dead silent as they heard Calvin's voice. "Your time will end. Evelyn. When it does, you won't be in control anymore." Calvin, sitting behind Madison, went pale. Jonah's next witness was Rosa Delgado. She took the stand and was all business. In a concise, 5-minute summary, she laid out the flow of money, using simple charts, from Heartline Diagnostics to a series of shell corporations to an offshore trust. "A trust," Rosa concluded, "managed by the same law firm that represents Mrs. Blake Hart in this proceeding." The judge leaned forward, her pen tapping. "Ms. Delgado, are you suggesting financial impropriety?" "I am stating," Rosa said, "that there is a clear, multi-million-dollar trail of non-transparent transactions leading directly away from Heartline and toward Mrs. Blake Hart's interests. The very interests she claims my client is too senile to protect." Madison's lawyer, frantic, tried to regain control on his redirect. "This is a smokescreen. This hearing is about Mrs. Hart's health, her stability." "Then let's talk about stability," Jonah said, rising for his final argument. "Why?" he asked the judge. "If Mrs. Blake Hart was so concerned about my client's fragile health, was she simultaneously, in concert with Mr. Calvin Reed, fast-tracking a multi-$100 million merger with Neovantage DIL that was contingent on one thing, and one thing only: Evelyn Hart being removed from the trust?" He put up his final slide. It was a split screen. On the left was Noah's will, the codicil highlighted in yellow. On the right was the last email Noah had ever sent him. Jonah read it aloud. "Jonah, I know this seems extreme, but I'm doing this in case Madison does exactly what I'm afraid of, tries to silence my mother and steal Heartline. This is the only way I know how to protect her." The room was frozen. Madison was no longer the grieving widow. She was a cornered animal. Her face was a mask of sheer panic. The judge stared at the screen for a long time. She took a deep breath, took off her glasses, and looked at the plaintiff's table. "This court," she said, her voice sharp as glass, "is suspending this hearing to review the entirety of the evidence presented, including the potential intersection of this guardianship petition with Mr. Hart's will and the serious financial allegations raised." She slammed her gavel. "We are in recess." Madison didn't move. She just stared at the screen, at Noah's words. She finally understood. The line in the will hadn't been a passing comment. It was a trap, and she had just walked straight into it. The judge's decision to recess was the break in the storm, the moment the hunters became the hunted. We hadn't even reached the lobby when Rosa's phone vibrated. She looked at the screen, her expression hardening. "It's the nurse," she said, her voice low. "The one who quit." She was terrified. After our first meeting, she'd received an anonymous deposit into her checking account for $10,000, followed by a simple text, "Be smart. Forget what you saw." But her conscience was eating her alive. We didn't meet at the diner. Jonah insisted on someplace quiet, someplace with no cameras. We met her in the candle-lit alcove of an old Catholic church downtown. She was shaking, clutching a folded piece of paper. "They forced me to delete the official incident report," she whispered, the words swallowed by the stone walls. "The night manager said I was misinterpreting a wife's grief and that the report was inflammatory. But I printed a draft copy from my workstation before I scrubbed it. I kept it." She slid the paper across the polished pew. It was the unofficial report, filled with her handwritten annotations. It detailed Madison's arrival after midnight. It confirmed she had brought the small, unlabeled glass vial, insisting it was a special herbal anti-nausea remedy. The nurse's notes were chilling. "Refused to administer unknown substance via IV line. Patient's wife became hostile. Threatened to sue the hospital and report this nurse for obstructing a patient's right to comfort care." Rosa took that report and placed it alongside the IT logs from the hospital technician. The pieces clicked together, forming a timeline of murder. At 1:12 in the morning, the nurse documented her refusal and left the room to answer another call light. At 1:14, Madison, alone with my son, logged into the patient side terminal. At 1:15, using her access, she navigated to the vital sign monitor settings and changed the alarm parameters, specifically disabling the remote cardiac alert to the nurse's station for a period of 15 minutes. At 1:30, the alarm delay expired. At 1:31, the system finally sent the alert, but by then, Noah had been in cardiac arrest, undetected, for that entire window. As I stared at the timeline, my vision blurring, Jonah's phone buzzed. It was the forensic accountant. "We got it," the man said, his voice clipped with excitement. "The offshore trust, the final beneficiary. It's not Madison. It's registered to the younger brother of Victor Hale, CEO of Neovantage." That was it. The link. The entire conspiracy? From the theft at Heartline to the buyout by Neovantage, all tied to my son's death. Jonah didn't wait. He filed an emergency motion to reopen the evidentiary hearing. We were back in front of the judge less than an hour later. "Your Honor," Jonah said, his voice echoing in the stunned courtroom, "this is no longer a civil matter." He laid out the incident report, the IT logs, and the new financial link. We have evidence of willful medical tampering and a conspiracy to commit fraud, all culminating in the death of Noah Hart. We request this court immediately refer this entire file to the state prosecutor's office. Lies! Madison shot up from her chair, her mask of maternal grief shattering. Fabrication. You can't prove any of it. She gripped the table, her knuckles white. He's trying to poison you against me. She spun, pointing at me, her face a mask of raw hatred. I was just trying to ease his pain. He was too weak. He was going to die anyway. The words hung in the dead silent room, a confession, a direct admission that she had taken medical action into her own hands. The judge's face went white. She slammed her gavel, the sound like a crack of thunder. Order, order in this court, Mrs. Blake Hart, the judge said, her voice trembling with cold fury. You are advised to remain silent. You are advised that anything you say can and will be used against you in a court of law. I strongly advise you to consult with a criminal defense attorney immediately. Madison froze, the color draining from her face as she realized what she had done. Behind her, I saw Calvin Reed physically deflate. He saw the guillotine. He saw conspiracy to commit murder. He immediately flagged down his lawyer, whispering frantically. A moment later, his lawyer was at Jonah's side. Calvin was offering to cooperate. He was offering a full confession in exchange for a deal. He had the emails. He turned them all over, including the one from Madison, sent the day before Noah died. We have to push the Neo-Vantage vote through the second he's gone, before the old hag realizes what's happening. The judge returned, her face grim. This court is suspending all civil proceedings in the matter of this guardianship. This entire file is hereby transferred to the district attorney's office, with a recommendation for a full criminal investigation into the intentional endangerment of a patient for financial gain. She looked at the assembled press, then at me. And let the record show, she said, her voice sharp, that had it not been for that one prescient line in Mr. Hart's will, this court might have been tragically misled by the plaintiff's narrative. Weeks later, we were back in the same courtroom. It was not a criminal trial, not yet, but a hearing to finalize the civil settlement. The atmosphere was heavy, suffocating. Madison entered, flanked not by corporate advisors, but by a new, somber team of criminal defense lawyers. She was no longer the radiant, pregnant widow. She was pale, gaunt, and the glow of victory had been replaced by the flat, dull sheen of defeat. The district attorney's representative stood and informed the judge that a full criminal investigation was underway, charges were imminent, and Mr. Calvin Reed was cooperating fully. Given that, a civil resolution had been reached. Madison, in exchange for avoiding a separate civil trial for fraud, would return every dollar traced to the offshore accounts and shell companies. Furthermore, she would voluntarily and permanently forfeit any and all claims to the Heartline Trust and the estate of Noah Hart. My side would not pursue additional punitive damages in civil court. The criminal charges, the DA stressed, were a separate matter. Madison sat, her hands clasped, trembling. As her lawyer pushed the signed agreement toward Jonah, she looked up at me. Her voice was a dry whisper, audible only to the front row. You won. You got it all. Are you happy? The question of my happiness echoed in the sterile room. Jonah looked at me, giving me the floor. I stood, my legs steady, and addressed the judge for the first time. Your Honor, I said. my voice quiet but clear. No one wins in this room. The only person I want here, my son, is gone. So no, I am not happy. I turned my head, just slightly, to look at the woman who had destroyed my family. But I will not, I cannot, allow the person who betrayed my son, who plotted to silence me and steal what we built, to ever lay a hand on the life's work that bears his name. I turned back to the judge. I will sign this agreement. On 2 conditions I want entered into the court record. 1, Madison Blake is permanently enjoined, for life, from holding any position, paid or advisory, at Heartline Diagnostics or any of its associated entities. 2, all assets designated for my granddaughter, Lily, are to be placed in an independent trust, managed by a court-appointed fiduciary. Until she is 30 years old, her mother will have no access and no control. Madison just stared blankly. Her lawyer nodded. It was done. The judge signed the order. The petition for guardianship, she declared, her voice ringing with finality, is hereby dismissed with prejudice. This court finds the last will and testament of Noah Hart to be valid in its entirety. She looked at the assembled press and lawyers. And let the record show that specific codicil, that one line, will likely stand as a powerful precedent for testators seeking to protect their legacy from the abusive actions of an heir. In the hallway, a gauntlet of cameras waited. Madison was hustled toward the elevators by her team. As she passed me, she stopped. Her face twisted with a final, pathetic spurt of venom. "You'll die alone," she hissed. "Alone with that old, crumbling company." I didn't raise my voice. I didn't need to. "Heartline isn't mine, Madison," I said softly. "It belongs to the people it saves. And I am not alone." The next week, I stood at the head of the Heartline boardroom. The traitors were gone, replaced by the honest leaders who remained. "The funds that were stolen have been returned," I announced. "They will not be reabsorbed into our operating budget. Instead, they will form the initial endowment for a new entity, the Noah Hart Trust for Patient Justice. It will fund legal aid for patients and families who have been wronged by the medical system." I took a breath. "I will not be resuming my role as CEO. It is time for new vision. But," I added, scanning the faces of my team, "I will be retaining my seat as chairwoman of the board." The story ends in the place it began, in the old lab, where Noah and I first dreamed of the future. It was late. I was alone, just looking at the blueprints on the wall. Jonah stepped in quietly, holding a file. "Your new will," he said. "It's ready to be signed." I took it. He pointed to a paragraph on the 3rd page. I had added a new line, my own version of Noah's, ensuring that anyone who tried to silence the future leadership of Heartline or betray its mission would be cut out just the same. The legacy was now protected from all sides. I nodded to him. Rosa appeared in the doorway, smiling. I looked around the dark, quiet lab one last time. Then I switched off the light. I walked out of the shadows and into the bright hallway with my allies. Outside, the large bronze sign gleamed, Heartline Diagnostics, a Hart family legacy. And just below it, newly installed, was a small, sharp plaque. It read, "And no one will ever silence it again." Thank you all so much for listening to my story. I'd really love to know where you're listening in from today. So please drop a comment below and share your thoughts. And don't forget to subscribe to Grandma's Family Diary. Give this video a like And please support us by hitting that hype button so more people get to hear this story.